Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show for Tuesday, October the 20th, 2020. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So why did she hang on for so long? She had something like half a different kinds of cancer. She was 87 years old. Was it simply narcissism, vanity, a feeling that she was indispensable, or was there something more to it? You know, as she was looking forward to the great reward, perhaps she thought there was one final service that she could perform the Critarchy. And as it turns out, there was. This is from Bloomberg. A short-term victory on Pennsylvania voting rules is giving Democrats much new reason to worry that Amy Coney Barrett's quick confirmation may lead to a much bigger defeat should the Supreme Court have to decide the presidential election. Associated Press says the Supreme Court will allow Pennsylvania to count mailed-in ballots received up to 3 days after the November 3rd election, rejecting a Republican plea in the presidential background state. The justices divided 4-4 on Monday, an outcome that upholds a state Supreme Court ruling that required county election officials to receive and count mailed-in ballots that arrive up to November 6th, even if they don't have a clear postmark, as long as there is not proof it was mailed after the polls were closed. And what would that proof possibly be? Republicans, including President Donald Trump's campaign, have opposed such an extension, arguing that it violates federal law that sets Election Day as the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and that such a decision constitutionally belongs to lawmakers, not the courts. The state Republican Party chairman, Lawrence Tabas, said that the party disagrees with the decision, and noting the 4-4 decision, it only underscores the importance of having a full Supreme Court as soon as possible. To be clear, the Supreme Court decided not to grant a stay, which does not mean the actions of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court would withstand a legal challenge to their judicial overreach should the court hear the case, Tabas said. Nancy Patton Mills, a chairwoman of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, accused Republicans of trying to sow confusion and disenfranchise eligible voters. This is a significant victory for Pennsylvania voters, Mills said in a statement. The Democratic majority in the state's high court has cited warnings that Postal Service delays could invalidate huge number of ballots and surging demand for mail-in ballots during the coronavirus pandemic to invoke the power used previously by the state's courts to extend election deadlines during a disaster emergency. Chief Justice John Roberts joined with the 3 liberal justices to reject Pennsylvania Republicans' call for the court to block the state court ruling. Justices Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Clarence Thomas would have required the state to stop accepting absentee ballots when the polls close on November the 3rd. So I guess we've known for quite a long time that John Roberts, the Chief Justice, is a squish, that he is the new Anthony Kennedy, but this really brings it home. So here we have a situation where we are going to get tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of harvested ballots after November the 3rd, so the Biden campaign can claim that they have won the state. Now, even if the Supreme Court does eventually hear the case, perhaps after the election, the Biden campaign and the media will be able to claim that somehow Donald Trump has stolen the election, whereas, of course, it's the Democrats who are going to try to steal the election. And how did this come about? It came about because Ruth Bader Ginsburg, staring the Grim Reaper in the eye, decided that she was not going to go willingly. She was going to have to be dragged from this earth. So, RBG Prevails. According to Bloomberg again, with Barrett poised to win Senate confirmation to the High Court as soon as Monday, those 4 may soon get the 5th vote they would need to overturn any state court ruling that expands voting or otherwise favors Democrats. Trump has said that he is counting on the court with Barrett aboard to back him in any dispute with Democrat Joe Biden. The 4-4 decision shows that Justice Barrett could well be a deciding voice that could hand an election to Trump in any Trump v. Biden post-election dispute, tweeted Rick Hassan, a voting rights expert who teaches at UC Irvine School of Law. Trump has spent months laying the groundwork for a legal fight, claiming despite minimal evidence, that mail-in voting will produce widespread fraud. Barrett, who would join Gorsuch and Kavanaugh as Trump-appointed justices, has refused to say whether the president's comment would prompt her to recuse from any election case. Why? Why would it prompt her to do so? The Pennsylvania fight summoned memories of the 2000 Bush v. Gore ruling, a 5-4 decision that sealed the presidential election for Republican George W. Bush. In a concurring opinion in that case, 3 conservative justices said that Florida Supreme Court usurped the authority of the state legislature by interpreting Florida's laws to allow a recount that might have benefited Democrat Al Gore. If you remember, in 2000, what the Democrats intended to do and almost got away with doing was to keep counting ballots, whatever their provenance, forever, or at least such time as that Gore was ahead of Bush, and then the counting would stop. So let's talk about Hunter Biden. And we have found out, we got Kazakhstan. Let's see, what do we got? We have the Ukraine, China, the Baltics. We have Kazakhstan. And now Romania in the list of countries in which he has peddled influence. This is from the New York Post, which of course broke the story of the laptop, which holds many thousands of incriminating Hunter Biden emails, and including incriminating Joe Biden emails. And if they are to believe, or certain people are to be believed, many disgusting and possibly incriminating photographs and videos. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Glenn Greenwald ripped what he labeled the mainstream media's cone of silence, nice Get Smart reference, for failing to report on the Post's expose last week that revealed Hunter Biden's business dealings with Ukraine and China and the connection to his father, Joe Biden. Is there a single journalist willing to say with a straight face they believe the emails relating to the Bidens are either fabricated or otherwise fraudulently altered, but the Bidens just aren't saying so? Greenwald, the founder of The Intercept, said in a series of tweets Monday, there has to be some limit to your willingness to go to bat for them. The Post stories, the first of which was published last Wednesday, reveal a trove of emails found on a laptop Hunter Biden left at a Wilmington, Delaware computer store in April 2019. One email to Hunter Biden from an advisor to the board of Burisma thanked him for the opportunity to meet his father. At the time, Hunter Biden served on the board and his father was vice president. The elder Biden, the current Democratic presidential nominee, had previously said he never discussed his son's overseas dealings with Hunter. And as I pointed out before, this alone is sufficient to disqualify Joe Biden from the office of President of the United States. That Hunter Biden, he's now 50 years old, by the way. You notice that Joe has been talking about him like, these kids, they graduate from university and they're a little bit at a loose end for a while, and maybe they get a little bit wild, but then they settle down. Hunter Biden is 50 years old. He's a grifter, a crackhead, an alcoholic with a penchant for strippers. Of course, he was also in an incestuous relationship with his sister-in-law, and he was in the lobbying game. So, of course, Joe Biden, who was traveling around the world as President Obama's point man, would never seek to ask Hunter Biden which pies he had his fingers in, because why would he want to do that? What possible embarrassment could arise? What possible, national security implications could arise? I don't think that the emails so far reveal a huge scandal, said Greenwald. They so far just establish standard sleaze and DC corruption. Well, if it is true that Joe Biden demanded that his various family members involved in grift kick up 50% of the take to him, I don't really think that's standard sleaze and DC corruption. But Greenwald continued, the huge scandal to me is the blatant rank closing and cone of silence, a prohibition erected by journalists around this story to defend Biden, Greenwald wrote in another posting. While a number of conservative-leaning outlets have picked up the story or expanded on it with new reporting like Fox News, most media outlets have refused to cover the scandal and even cast doubt on its veracity. Greenwald, who won a Pulitzer Prize in 2014 while at The Guardian for reporting on Edward Snowden's leaking of National Security Agency data, said there's a reason Joe Biden has been mum about the emails. Quote, when you report a huge archive, there's no way to prove the negative that none of it is altered. You investigate and confirm as much as you can, then use your journalistic judgment. The only way you get confirmation is when the subjects of the reporting don't deny the authenticity. You know the subjects of the reporting will immediately claim they're fake if they are. Of course they will. That would kill the reporting. There's a reason the Bidens aren't claiming they're fake. Joe Biden has refused to comment on the Post story, telling a reporter last week that he had, quote, no response, unquote. He has since been holed up in his Delaware home preparing for Thursday night's debate with President Trump, otherwise known as hiding in his basement. The Biden campaign said it checked his schedule from when he was vice president and found no meetings with an advisor to Burisma. This is one of the claims that is most infuriating that the media is actually taking seriously. Because if the vice president of the United States was involved in corrupt dealings with foreigners, particularly foreigners associated with his corrupt son, would Joe Biden's office actually put these meetings in the official schedule? It reminds me of an episode of Veep where Sue, the vice president's secretary, is getting into it during an investigation into one of her many scandals. And the question of whether a meeting was held. And Sue says, well, you don't understand what that means. She said, for instance, I've met Bill Gates, but I've never had a meeting with him. Now, it seems to me that everyone in journalism understands the difference. If they don't understand the difference, they're too stupid to be in journalism. Here's a story by John Daniel Davidson at The Federalist, why big media will never report on Hunter Biden's emails, but they will gladly report on the reporting of the emails. And this is not because there's nothing to the story or because the emails are fake, but because the story itself is on its face harmful to Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. That's not to say news outlets haven't been writing about the Post's reporting. They've simply decided to cover the meta-narrative, the story about the story, while studiously ignoring what Hunter Biden's emails reveal about his family's overseas business dealings and influence peddling. Yes, this is one of the most infuriating things about the modern media is let's not talk about the story. Let's talk about the meta story. For quite a few years now, journalists have concerned themselves with not the meat of any story, but how does it affect other things? How does it affect the polling? For instance, as far as I'm concerned, polling is not news and it is not speech as defined by the founding fathers. It is manufacturing consent as defined by Herman and Chomsky, and I think it should be banned. But no, the media is all about who's up and who's down. And how about policies? Let's talk about policies. No, they don't want to talk about policies. Let's just ask, when did you stop beating your wife questions to Donald Trump about disavowing white supremacists, something which they all know that he has done, 5, 10, 15, 20 times? Davidson continues, here's how it works. Instead of aggressive follow-up reporting on the context of Hunter Biden's emails, which is what you'd expect from news organizations, we've gotten a wave of process stories about the anatomy of the Post's dubious reporting, censorship stories about Twitter and Facebook, and wild conspiracy theory stories about a rumored Russian disinformation plot. Last week, when this all broke, the focus shifted quickly from Hunter Biden's emails to a decision by Facebook and Twitter to censor the Post's reporting, and in Twitter's case, lock the Post official account for posting hacked materials. There's no evidence the emails were hacked. When Twitter tried to walk back, but also justify its draconian policies, the media reported on that too. And when a handful of Republican senators announced they'd be subpoenaing Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey over the imbroglio, the media reported on that too. What they didn't report on is the obvious thing the emails reveal. Hunter Biden was trading on his family name overseas, and Joe Biden, despite his many denials, seems to have been aware of this and might even have been a part of it. Understand what's going on here. The media will report on almost any aspect of this story, no matter how tangential or relatively insignificant, rather than grapple with the story itself. Almost nothing is too trivial on this front. Over the weekend, we got stories in the New York Times and New York Magazine about behind-the-scenes dissent from a handful of anonymous Post employees who thought the Biden story shouldn't have run. The Times article goes into great detail about whose bylines were attached to the Post reporting, how long each reporter had been at the paper, where he or she had worked previously, and the process top Post editors went through before publication. I'd like to see this same process applied to stories that appear in the New York Times, because that would be pretty hilarious. Let's look at the people who reported this story. Where did they work before, for instance? And what was the process that New York Times editors went through before publication? Same for the New York Magazine article, which also tacitly dismissed the substance of the Post reporting, supposed scoop, purported emails, while quoting anonymous Post reporters grousing about how they've been bracing for the Post to go pro-Trump before the election. Yes, I imagine it must have been a pretty big shock for reporters at the New York Post to discover that their newspaper is supporting Donald Trump. I mean, they just didn't see that coming. They were gobsmacked. What meager follow-up reporting on the substance of the emails we have seen has almost all been for the purpose of undermining the Post. The Washington Post, for one, was quick to fact-check the Post by casting vague aspersions on its reporting, while failing to offer any new information or insights into the trove of emails detailing Hunter Biden's foreign business deals. I tell you, when Trump wins the election on November 3rd, I want to see dozens of reporters from the New York Times and the Washington Post testifying under oath about the sources of their Russiagate stories. How very droll that will be. Even more embarrassing have been outlets like CNN and USA Today, which, citing, wait for it, unnamed sources, breathlessly speculated that the FBI was investigating whether the emails were a possible disinformation campaign originating from where else? Moscow. Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe on Monday laid these feverish rumors to rest, saying the recovered laptop and emails are not part of some Russian disinformation campaign. Now, I used to be a political reporter. I used to cover provincial and national stories, and I had occasion to use anonymous sources. Now, I can tell you I never made up any of these anonymous sources, either the existence of them or what they had to say. And I suppose some people say, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? I can say in my defense that no one ever came forward to say that I'd made up any stories. It never happened. And I suppose one of the ways that you can do that is not to write obviously mendacious partisan stories. That's one way to avoid it. Now, oftentimes political rivals of people who I had written about were upset with my stories, but frequently they were upset by my stories in that I revealed things that were true, which they would have preferred not to see revealed. But, the media wonders why it's so hated now. This is from Mediaite, to give an example. Mediaite has learned that Fox News was first approached by Rudy Giuliani to report on a tranche of files alleged to have come from Hunter Biden's unclaimed laptop. but that the news division chose not to run the story unless or until the sourcing and veracity of the emails could be properly vetted. With the general election just 3 weeks away, Giuliani ultimately brought the story to the New York Post, which shares the same owner, Rupert Murdoch. The tabloid has been exhaustively covering the contents of the laptop. Not exhaustively, not yet, which include everything from emails regarding Hunter Biden's work for a Ukrainian company to personal photos of the recovering addict. Oh, he's an addict. And we all love addicts. We all love junkies, don't we? And they're very special people who deserve very special consideration from us. You see how they turned the truth on its head? When you learn that someone is a drunkie or a drunk or whatever, the way it used to be and the way everyone understood it is what this person says and does is suspect. But no, it's a recovery story. And how dare you take issue with someone who has lived a recovery story, rather. Yeah. Let's go to the chat, see what's going there. Ersatz, I love that word. Chocokin666 makes a Jeffrey Toobin joke. I've seen it suggested that he is going to keep his job at the New Yorker and at CNN. And could this be true? Could this possibly be true? Are they, is he going to brazen it out? I made a mistake. A mistake? You know what a mistake would be? A mistake would be deciding that you were too lazy to get properly dressed. And so you decided to do a Zoom meeting wearing a dressing gown, and it wasn't secured properly, and the old fellow popped out. That would be a mistake. Putting your Johnson, taking it out of your pants, and then masturbating during a Zoom meeting, that is not a mistake. That is just grossly irresponsible behavior. Okay, what else do we got here? Tom Anderson says, KMG, what do you think about the court? Yeah, okay. What I think is that the Biden campaign is going to use this as an excuse to say that he won Pennsylvania. And even if the Supreme Court rules against him, they can see, Trump stole the election. Quachalango says, oh my God, try to fluff your plants up to equal volume. Well, I don't know. Maybe I should put pieces of tape on the floor, marks, as they call them in show biz. I don't know. Maybe I'll do that. Hauper says ballots thrown around like late 1990s AOL software. That is very good. That is very, very good. Impossible. Justin Prado says, I read today that Martians have Joe Biden in their pocket. Well, if there was money made to be by selling influence to the Martians, Hunter and Joe Biden would be there. William Hicks said the court of Florida in 2000 created a new law with procedures for dangling chads, over votes, etc. They tried to extend the deadline for the state secretary to ratify the results. Do you remember the meme that Pat Buchanan stole the election for George W. Bush? Do you remember that? Because with this butterfly ballot, apparently the old people in Florida were just too delulu to understand the ballot, and they just inexplicably voted for Pat Buchanan. Okay, head McNeck, Biden supporters are passing through the denial stage of this unfathomable grief. Their first refusal to believe the story is beginning to border on the insane. I don't know, but I mean, how could you sugarcoat this? There's no really way you could sugarcoat it. There's only a couple of ways to look at it. One is that, oh no, the story is dubious. Or, is there anything new here? Because the alternative, or, it's Russian disinformation. The alternative, yeah, So we did it. Everybody does it. So what? Joe Biden has spent his entire life in what is laughingly called public service, and yet he lives in a home in Delaware worth $16 million. How is that possible? How is that possible? Walsh Libertarian says reporting on sassy tweets is real journalism. Well, I find myself reporting, if you want to call it that, on sassy tweets myself, because if that's what the media is going to talk about, and I am talking about the media, I guess I'm going to be talking about sassy tweets as well. Let's see. A Young Earth says, KMG, you always say good afternoon, good evening, depending where you might be, but never good morning. Why do you so despise your early morning viewers? I don't. And I know I have at least one viewer in Australia, but it would seem to be stretching it a bit much. Quachalango says, KMG, I call your plants Shiva and Oberon. That's very sweet. That's very sweet. I quite like that. Good morning is understood. Metal Mike says, Kevin, what brand of mic do you use? The sound is great. You may want to put a pop blocker on it. It is I'm going to have to lift it up here. It's a well-known brand. It's an internet mic called a something blue. Never enable an addict, says Chogokin666. Yeah. CNN peaked in 1979. Was it even on the air in 1979? Marv Albert survived. Why not Tubin? Did Marv Albert survive? I suppose he may have survived. I mean, Pee Wee Herman survived. But I guess, appearing in Todd Solondz movie is not quite the same thing as having your own TV show. Is it? But, I mean, Jeffrey Toobin is arguably at the top of the heap, right? Legal correspondent for The New Yorker and chief legal analyst for CNN and the author of many books. And again, I read his book on the O.J. Simpson case, which I thought was quite good. Of course, he had a book a few years after that called The Oath, which is about Barack Obama and the Supreme Court. And I thought, these are the kind of books that go straight to the remainder bin. Who on earth would buy such a book? Or who would read it? Chogokin666 says, how does one get Randy on a Zoom with those women, especially Masha Gessen? Yikes. Use that joke from Brave New World. She looks as if she was decanted wrong. No, apparently the story is that he had some other thing going. I don't know, maybe like he had porn channel on as well, and a Blue Yeti, yeah, that's what it's called. But, obviously in a situation like that, come on, man. Come on. It's not like, I'm in the Zoom chat. Oh, God, this is so boring. Luckily, I have my, Microsoft Solitaire here or the free chess program. No, this is a little different. Oh, Head McNeck says, I call the plants Lenny and Squiggy. Oh, good ones. There are pop blockers available for those, says Metal Mike. And yeah, it's a good time suggestion. I'll call them Shiva and Kali, says Chogokin666. Wow. Yes, that's all very impressive chat. William Hicks, more importantly, Marv Albert's toupee survived. Was he ever divested of his toupee? Maybe I'm just imagining such an incident. I see that Trump abruptly ends 60 Minutes interview before taping joint appearance with Pence. Apparently, he told Leslie Stahl, he spoke to her for 45 minutes, told the network he believed they had enough material to use. Okay. All right. Trump doesn't like the media, and he's got good reason not to like the media. Oh, let's talk about some more experts here, the people who rule our lives and Ministry of Information. This is from RT. Oh, yeah, that's Russian. Okay. Well, the Washington Post is CIA and has been since the 1950s. Look up Operation Mockingbird. That's another conspiracy theory, which turned out to be true. Wikipedia says Hunter Biden scandal debunked as editing war rages. A new page emerges calling it a conspiracy. Allegations of corruption against ex-Veep Joe Biden and his son Hunter have apparently been debunked and are merely a conspiracy theory, according to Wikipedia, where editors are battling over the terms. Hunter, yeah, we know the Hunter Biden story. But while the story is still unfolding, the Wikipedia page for Hunter Biden simply states that, quote, he and his father have been the subjects of debunked right-wing conspiracy theories pushed by Donald Trump and his allies, unquote. You want to go into detail there, Wikipedia? Debunked by whom, by the way? Was it a conspiracy theory that the United States of America was surveilling the Soviet Union by air? Well, America insisted, no, this is preposterous. No, we're not spying on the Soviet Union. And then Francis Gary Powers and his U-2 got shot down, and they had, yep, you got us. We were spying on you. 8 sources are listed for this one sentence, including intending to support the view that any accusations of corruption against the Democratic presidential candidate and his son have already been proven false. In recent days, Wikipedia editors have been engaged in regular spats about the inclusion of the word debunked. The 8th source was added on Sunday by a frequent contributor to Biden's son's page, whose user's name is Soy Bangla. A regular editor of American political topics on Wikipedia, Soy Bangla was previously found tweaking pedophile sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein's page, specifically to note that there is, quote, no evidence that he and former Bill Clinton were friends, despite the ex-commander-in-chief traveling on the disgraced financier's plane 26 times. I suppose you could travel on a private plane for 26 times without being friends with the fellow who owned the plane. It reminds me when the Premier of BC, Glenn Clark, got involved in a corruption scandal, which had to do with having 2 decks on his house built for free. He paid them for the materials, not for the labor. And there was this Greek Canadian in Burnaby who was doing the work for him. And the phones were tapped. And Glenn Clark insisted, no, I was never close to this fellow. And then it turned out he was talking to him like 20, 25 times a week, which sounds pretty close to me. A war over Hunter Biden's page has been raging since December 2019, when the word debunked was initially added in reference to the scandal involving the former Veep's role in Burisma. It seems to me that most people today, and perhaps most people who edit Wikipedia, believe that debunked means the same thing as denied, in the same way that rebutted supposedly now means the same thing as refuted. It was kicked off again September 30th when user PHP2000 removed debunked, noting that sources state Hunter Biden was making $50,000 US a month as a board member in Ukraine gas company, hardly debunked. Just 2 minutes later, according to the website's timeline, editor Bill McKern reverted the change, adding, it's been debunked and we have consensus language here. Ooh, sick burn, consensus language. PHP 2000 once again deleted the word, explaining that Hunter Biden making a lot of money in Ukraine was a well-documented fact. What exactly has been debunked? They asked. Read the references, wrote Bill McKern a mere 4 minutes later. Yeah, the references are saying this story's been debunked or this story's been refuted. It's this circular kind of journalism that we see with Russiagate. There are a bunch of whoppers created by a team working for Hillary Clinton's campaign were alleged about Donald Trump. People involved with the FBI and other alphabet agencies leaked these to the news media. The news media reported these whoppers, and then the alphabet agency said, see, it's true, because it's in the New York Times and the Washington Post. I found another interesting story. It's from last month, but I hadn't seen it before. You might be interested in it. It's also from RT. C-SPAN footage of Joe Biden interacting with girls is being flagged by Twitter for violating their child sexual exploitation policy after popping up online during an argument about the politician's character. The dispute on social media saw Texan progressive activist Johnny Graz seeking to make a case that the Democratic presidential nominee should be investigated for sexual assault. Another commenter, who goes by the name Jake Koenig, sought to support Graz's argument by posting a video compilation of Biden touching various young girls during photo ops at their parents' congressional swear-in ceremonies in 2015. However, the commenter was unable to post the official public footage of the proceedings because Twitter flagged him for trying to post images of child molestation. So Twitter, which is the Ministry of Truth, has determined that pictures of Joe Biden, the former vice president of the United States, and now presumptive next president of the United States, that photos or videos of him interacting with underage girls constitute child sexual exploitation. Do they have any idea what they've just admitted here? It's too much. It is too much. Koenig's claim was easily verifiable, as Twitter does indeed very quickly identify the video as prohibited content that violates their child sexual exploitation policy. Moreover, the website bans the poster's account until they've deleted the footage. The infamous footage shows the former Veep touching U.S. legislators' daughters and granddaughters. At various points, he appears to be holding some girls in place and closely leaning in to say something in their ears. The discussion around Biden's behavior has largely been fueled by a string of accusations by several women that he inappropriately touched them. The claims did not attract much media attention, even though they coincided with the rise of the highly publicized Me Too movement, self-tasked with bringing powerful men to account for sexual misbehavior against women. The organization's largest personalities did not seem to be interested in Reid's case, which led to infighting and accusations of partisanship. Biden himself denied the allegations, saying that nothing like this ever happened. So again, pictures of Joe Biden with underage women, child sexual exploitation. Oh, as long as we're being meta here, why don't we talk about that now? No, but we just don't want to. We don't want to embarrass, old Joe. He's an old man. Perhaps he's not all that well. He's not on top of things the way that he used to be. And he's had so very much sadness in his life. Then why is he running for president then? Why is he always talking up his dead son, Beau, as if it were Beau running instead of him? Story from the Post by Ebony Bowden. Photo shows Joe Biden meeting Hunter's alleged business partner from Kazakhstan. He is posing. Joe and Hunter are posing with Kenes Rakishev, a Kazakh oligarch who reportedly worked with the former Veep's scandal-scarred son. And also in this picture is the former Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, Karim Masimov. The snap, first published by a Kakistani anti-corruption website in 2019, follows last week's bombshell post-exposés detailing Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings. In an undated photo shared by the Kakistani Initiative on Asset Recovery, the former Veep can be seen smiling with Kazakhstan's former Prime Minister Masimov and his son, who is flanked by Rakishev. A Daily Mail report published Friday detailed Hunter Biden's alleged work with Rakishev, claiming he dined regularly with the Kazakh businessman and attempted to facilitate investment for his cash in New York, Washington, D.C., and a Nevada mining company. But Rakishev, who enjoys close ties to Kazakhstan's kleptocratic former president, reportedly ran into trouble when Western business partners realized that the opaque origins of his reported $300 million fortune could become a liability, the Post reported. The photo's authenticity has not been independently verified, but comes as the family faces growing scrutiny over Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings while the elder Biden was President Barack Obama's vice president. Okay, so just assume for the moment that this photograph is true. It is not faked. This photograph alone blows out of the water Biden's claims that he knew nothing about his son's lobbying activities. Are we supposed to believe that Hunter Biden just happened to find himself in Kazakhstan and Joe Biden just happened to find himself in Kazakhstan? So, hey, as long as we're both here in Kazakhstan, how about we have dinner with an oligarch? Yeah, that'll be fun. You've heard of these oligarchs, right? Yeah. How about the Prime Minister of Kazakhstan and his son? Yeah, I saw them in the lobby. Let's all get together, have dinner, and we'll all smile for a photograph. Why are you smiling for a photograph with your son and these guys, Joe Biden? This suggests irresponsibility, or perhaps just plain stupidity. Here's a story from NBC News, and it's from a year ago. In the final year of the Obama administration, American lawyer traveled to Romania to meet with a businessman accused of orchestrating a corrupt land deal. The businessman was Gabriel Popoviciu, a wealthy Romanian real estate tycoon. The lawyer brought in to advise him was Hunter Biden, the son of then Vice President Joe Biden, according to two people familiar with the matter. Hunter Biden's work for Popoviciu in 2016 went unreported at the time, but Joe Biden's involvement in Romania was very much public. The vice president was among the leading voices pushing the government to crack down on corruption. Did Barack Obama just hand off everything relating to foreign policy to Joe Biden? Aren't there diplomats for that sort of thing? Oh, yes. Let's talk about the Streisand effect again. And, well, how did it work? Did it work out the way it's supposed to? This is Emily Zanotti at the Daily Wire. Twitter's crackdown on a controversial New York Post story that purported to show new emails, blah, 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 nearly doubled the story's visibility and triggered the so-called Streisand effect, amplifying the Post's claims, according to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a high-profile media intelligence firm. When Twitter banned and then unbanned links to a questionably sourced New York Post article about Joe Biden's son Hunter, its stated intention was to prevent people from spreading harmful false material as America heads into the final stretch of the election campaign, MIT's technology report reported Monday. But thanks to the cycle of misinformation and claims for conservatives that social media platforms are deliberately censoring their views, Twitter managed to do the opposite of what it intended. Thanks to the cycle of misinformation, what does that mean? Claims from conservatives that social media platforms are deliberately censoring their views. Yes, they are deliberately censoring their views. Can anyone actually doubt this? Yes, I know some lefties will say we get silenced too, and yes, that's a bad thing too. In fact, Twitter's efforts triggered a massive spike in interest in the story. According to Signal Labs, a media intelligence firm, shares of the Post article nearly doubled after Twitter started suppressing it, MIT noted. The incident was a real-time example of what Signal Labs called the Streisand effect, a social phenomenon that occurs when an attempt to hide, remove, or censor information has the unintended consequence of further publicizing that information via the internet, according to Wikipedia. Signal found a surge of shares immediately after Twitter instituted the block, jumping from about 5.5 thousand shares every 15 minutes to about 10,000. That doesn't necessarily mean the block caused the explosion in interest, but the surge corresponds with a series of widely shared tweets from Trump supporters and conservatives accusing the platform of political censorship, MIT noted Monday. The New York Post story, which was blocked on Twitter for about a day, okay, I'll get to that in a minute, was shared 352,200 times on the platform. But let's look at this. This is from Breitbart. Okay, maybe it did work. From Lucas Nolan today, as a recent study by the social media engagement tracking firm NewsWhip found that the New York Post's recent bombshell story on Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and their alleged deal with Burisma had its reach cut in half by Facebook compared to anti-Trump stories from other publications. This stands in stark contrast to Twitter's efforts to censor the story, which actually doubled the attention it received, according to the aforementioned MIT Technology Review. Newsweek reports that social media tracking firm NewsWhip recently analyzed the engagement that the Post's bombshell story on Biden received across social media. The data on the story's engagement across social media compiled by Newswhip shows that roughly 1.94 million people engaged with the Post story in the first 24 hours after it was published. As of Sunday, about 2.12 million readers had engaged with the story. That's fascinating to me because it suggests to me the old fish wrap principle that, okay, people are interested in a story, any story, for a day, and then they're no longer interested in it because something new has happened. Oh, but I guess this could be because of the suppression, because according to Breitbart, when The Atlantic published a story which alleged that President Trump referred to fallen soldiers as losers and suckers, 3.69 million readers engaged with the story on Facebook in the first 24 hours. As of Sunday, 6.86 million people had read the story. Yeah. Trump referred to fallen soldiers as losers and suckers in front of a bunch of important people, including generals. Did he? No, he obviously didn't. And it's not just a question of being dishonest. This goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. Okay, and this is from Tristan Justice at The Federalist. Twitter is temporarily changing how users can retweet during the final stretch of the election, and I ran into that today, and it was disconcerting because I thought that my computer had slowed to a halt. Something else had gone wrong with it. A move which the company says will discourage the spread of false information. Apparently, any story, any tweet which gets really, really popular, it must be false information. Then, the website changes announced October 9th are being implemented less than a week after the platform began suppressing blockbuster reporting from the New York Post publishing compromising information of Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. Starting Tuesday, which is today, users who go to retweet will instead be taken to the, quote, tweet box, prompting users to comment on the content being reposted on their own feeds. Quote, though this adds some extra friction for those who simply want to retweet, we hope it will encourage everyone to not only consider why they are amplifying a tweet, but also increase the likelihood that people add their own thoughts, reactions, and perspectives to the conversation, the company explained. Yeah, that's why they're doing it. Users can still retweet if they simply post republish without typing any additional comments where prompted. Twitter says the new change will remain in place until at the least of election week in November. Meanwhile, the Twitter account from the New York Post is still locked 6 days after breaking major news about Joe Biden. Frozen out of Twitter for 6 days, confirms Emma Jo Morris of the Post. So earlier, apparently, they weren't suppressing this story. Yeah, they are suppressing this story because the news organization which originated the story, the New York Post, is now locked out of Twitter. Why? Because it won't delete posts about the Biden scandal. Subsequent reporting from the Post and confirmed by Fox News showed Chinese businessmen with deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party were preparing to offer Hunter Biden $10 million a year for introductions alone, 10% of which would have been funneled to Joe Biden. David Marcus comments, the New York Post story dropped 6 days ago. The Biden campaign has still not disputed a single fact in the story. I like this. Chinese businessmen with deep ties to the Communist Party. Who are the Chinese businessmen who don't have deep ties to the Communist Party? I suppose, someone who runs a noodle stand or whatever might not have deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party. But when you're talking about over $1 billion changing hands, yes, obviously these businessmen have deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party. I get the impression that what the people in the West don't know how communism works in China, that it is, among other things, a mercantilist racket. Okay, so let's have a look at the chat. Tricky Woo says, I am super pro-vaccine for Merkel, Bojo, Macron, Trudeau, and Jacinda Ardern, etc. I was in Walmart today and being beaten over the head over the flu vaccine. Yep. Enron to William Hicks. Alan Rickman gets most of the credit for it being a good movie in my book. I so wanted him to kill Bruce Willis. It is a very nice suit, Mr. Tagagi. Yeah, we're talking about Die Hard here, I guess. That stuff with the broken glass on the feet, Bruce Willis's feet. Yeah, suspension of disbelief can only go so far. Also, one of my least favorite movie cliches, let's send the bad guys one by one to be killed off one by one, instead of just flooding the zone to make sure that Bruce Willis gets killed. Because every indication that we've had about these criminals is that they are exceedingly intelligent, and their plan, entirely ingenious, is exceedingly well planned. But apparently they never came to the part about, what if there's someone in the part of the building and he shouldn't be there? Well, we'll have to kill him, won't we? Or who's ever there, we'll have to kill him. Well, how will we do that? Well, I guess we'll get a bunch of men with guns, with big guns, who will just clear the area and kill everyone who's not one of us. Quachalango says, never seen a Biden sign or bumper sticker. I have heard that. Armand H. says, what do you think of Rudy Giuliani's revelation tonight that there's photos of Hunter Biden with underage children? Could be true. Haven't seen the evidence. Haven't seen the evidence. William Hicks says, oh, come on, Kevin, Die Hard is the greatest action flick in history. The movie also has one of my least favorite cliches, that Russian ballet dancer, the guy who will not be killed. Oh, come off it. Come off it. Oh, Amron, Kevin, what did Hitchcock call criticism like that? He called them, the people who made criticism, the implausibles. Okay. Yeah, and I understand your point. I understand your point about that. But okay, so I can buy one big implausibility that they wouldn't have a plan for killing off the interloper. But as I say, when Bruce Willis's feet are torn to pieces by broken glass, I'm sorry, he's out of the fight. What do I like? That black cop, the donut eater, down on the ground. I quite liked him in that movie. Bruce Willis's wife, oh, what a bitch. The guy who plays the coke sniffing executive, the really skeezy guy who thinks he's going to take everything in hand. I quite liked him. Quite liked him in that. Okay, let's go further up in the chat. Oh, yes. The local cops duking it out with the FBI and all that. In all of these cop movies, aren't the FBI, aren't they always the bad guys? Aren't they always arrogant and incompetent? But we're supposed to believe that Americans love the FBI? Tom Anderson says, KMG, what are the chances that all this is some sort of meta move by big tech to get Trump elected? Seems unlikely they wouldn't consider that their overt censorship would cause Streisand effect. No, I think they're nowhere near as clever as they believe they are. I mean, Twitter it's a gatekeeping operation now. Google's a gatekeeping operation. Facebook's a gatekeeping operation. There's no innovation there. And again, this continual, what was it, some months ago or a year ago? Trump's account was temporarily shut down. And Jack Dorsey didn't get a call about this Or if he did get a call, he said, look, I got more important things to do. I got this other company no one's ever heard of I'm supposed to be running as well. Daniel Ebel says, Twitter wants the New York Post to take down 6 stories. Debreas, Hunter ruled Ukraine with the help of the Russians. Well, no, once again, as Andrew McCarthy quite rightly pointed out in National Review, this has never been about Russia, and it's always been about the Ukraine. Metal Mike says, funny, it was said that unlike W, Obama took the reins back from the Veep, but it seems Biden had more power than we were told. Well, yeah, I was very surprised and somewhat put out that Dick Cheney seemed, when he was vice president for George W. Bush, he seemed to be assuming powers that belong solely to the president of the United States. But maybe that is, maybe all Veeps have to be like that. No, that's not true, because Mike Pence isn't like that. He's back to, the good old days, described by John Nance Garner, who was Veep for 2 terms under FDR, that the office of the vice presidency is about as useful as a bucket of warm piss. John Nance Garner, he was a great guy. He fought against Roosevelt, his assumption that he owned the Democratic Party. He thought that the New Deal and the expansion of government and restriction of liberty had gotten completely out of control. He left after 2 terms. He did not vote in the election for Roosevelt's 3rd term. And after his term was completed on Inauguration Day, he got on the train to Texas and never set foot in Washington, D.C. again. He was a good man. Tom Anderson says, Jonathan Greenblatt is proud of the ADL's role in the censorship of Trump and other conservatives, and has said that Twitter will delete any Trump tweets claiming victory before they deem it okay. Yeah? Well, you may have seen the rumors that, Twitter was down or crippled last week for several hours, and it was all because they went algorithm crazy, or they were manually intervening in order to stop this New York Post story. It'll be fun to watch on election night. I'm kind of thinking, with regard to my own Twitter use, that, I suppose people like me, we're going to have to resort to, I don't know, Soviet-style expressions, or simply use deep, sickeningly deep irony. I don't think that their algorithms are sufficient to detect a deep irony. In Seattle, there are very few Biden-Harris signs, says Bulgarian horticulture specialist, PhD. Yeah, there's been a debate on that, what they used to call Monterey Pacific Peninsula College. And P-Man says that signs are not really a reliable gauge of anything. That is to say, that it's typically enthusiastic people who put signs on their lawns or in their windows or whatever, but you don't have to be enthusiastic to vote for someone. Although I do think that enthusiasm matters for a lot, because people like to vote for something and not nothing. Palcasso 88 says, Kevin, what do you think of the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey? Not very much, I must say. Okay, what did you think of Jeremy Irons and his brother in DH3? Jeremy Irons is, I thought he was quite good. If you want a snotty English villain, you can't go wrong with Jeremy Irons. Okay, let's get back to the show here. And did you ever think that you would live in a world where, coming into a presidential election, less than 2 weeks away from a presidential election, where the Democrats are seriously talking about putting the president of the United States in prison, and the other guys are seriously talking about putting the Democrat candidate and his allies in prison? And this is not hyperbole. This is not mere rhetoric. They mean it. I didn't exactly see that coming. Oh, here's a white pill for some people, I guess. would appear that Donald J. Trump has secured the coveted Ben Shapiro vote. And from Breitbart, Donald Trump, Bill Barr, has to act fast to investigate Joe Biden. We got to get the Attorney General to act, Trump said in an interview on Fox and Friends. He's got to act. He's got to act fast. He's got to appoint somebody. Well, he could appoint a special investigator, and the Democrats win the election. The special investigator is going to be fired, because that's how it works. Because we all know that Trump couldn't fire Robert Mueller because the military is going to remove him. But if the Democrats take control, any convenient investigations will be halted, and the people in charge of those investigations, like John Durham, will be punished. Come on, we all understand this, don't we? Curious story from the London Independent from a day ago, from Clémence Michelin in New York City. Jim Carrey's portrayal of Joe Biden has failed to charm viewers who have dismissed it as a cringe super spreader, while suggesting another comedian took over the part. It should have been take over the part. That's not my mistake. Carrey made his debut as Biden on Saturday Night Live's 46th season premiere on the 3rd of October. The performance immediately drew mixed reactions, and the public's impressions have not improved since. The actor returned as the Democratic candidate in the most recent SNL episode, which dedicated its cold open to Biden and Donald Trump's simultaneous town halls. That performance was met with renewed criticism, including a Vanity Fair review titled "Saturday Night Live has a Jim Carrey problem." It sounded like a great get at first, Karen Valby wrote of Carrey's casting, but after 3 episodes, Carrey still hasn't managed to break through. Maybe he's too physical a performer or too needy a showman to capture the flapjack earnestness of the former vice president. That is not how I would describe the former vice president. He's a fabulizer. He tells these amazing stories, which are shit that never happened, not text. Oh, yeah, and talks about, transsexual 8-year-olds. Gotta love that. Oh, did I ever tell you about the time in 1951 or 1961 where my working class Catholic dad saw 2 men kissing in downtown Wilmington, Delaware? And the latest version of the story, they're 2 black men. Really? I would think it'd be rather dangerous enough in Wilmington, Delaware in 1959 or 1961 for 2 men to kiss in public, but making them black men makes it rather dangerous. But see, when young Joe Biden was rather nonplussed at this display, his father turned to him and said, "Joey, it's simple. They love each other." I have seen Jim Carrey's impersonation of Joe Biden, and it captures an aspect of his personality, with the aviator sunglasses and the finger guns, and that Joe Biden thinks that he is one cool dude. I mean, we've all known this, right? We've all known this. Was he drive a Corvette? And the ladies love Joe Biden. But it seems to me that what the Independent is telling us here is that it's all very well for Saturday Night Live to give us a caricature of Donald Trump portrayed by Alec Baldwin, but it is wrong for SNL to give us a caricature of Joe Biden as delivered by Jim Carrey, because Joe Biden is the good guy. Charlotte Clymer, who is a woman, and definitely a woman, and a blue tick, tweeted, "I say this with love and respect. It's not too late to replace Jim Carrey and get someone else, anyone else, to play Joe Biden. Let Kate McKinnon do it. She's already there and she'll nail the role. Have mercy on us all." Yes, let's have that unpleasant lesbian play all the roles on Saturday Night Live. I don't know whether I've mentioned this before, but for a long time, I've only seen clips of Saturday Night Live when they have gone viral or someone's trying to, make them viral. I hadn't really watched the show because it's rubbish. Has been for quite some time. But the Saturday after Donald Trump won, November the 8th, 2016, I thought, I got to see. I just got to see. So there's Kate McKinnon, and she's kitted out as Hillary Clinton, and she's singing Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. And I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. When is the joke going to kick in? Yeah, fake out, right? No, it was completely straight. And I thought, this is supposed to be a comedy show. You guys know that, right? But no, so that made it funny in its own way. As far as comedy goes, this is a terribly important story from Natasha Bertrand and Kyle Cheney at Politico. President Donald Trump was in the middle of receiving a highly classified briefing on Afghanistan at his New Jersey golf club when he suddenly craved a malted milkshake. Does anyone want a malt? He asked the senior defense and intelligence officials gathered around him, an august group that included the head of the CIA's Special Activities Center, which is responsible for covert operations and paramilitary operations. We have the best malts. You have to try them, Trump insisted, as he beckoned a waiter into the room where code word classified intelligence was being discussed. The malt incident, which took place a few months after Trump took office in 2017, became legendary inside the CIA, said three former officials. It was seen as an early harbinger of Trump's disinterest in intelligence. They mean uninterest. Disinterest is not the same thing, which would later be borne out by the new president's notorious resistance to reading his classified daily briefing, known as the PDB, and his impatience with the briefers, current and former officials said. There have been a whole host of stories like this about Donald Trump, and we're supposed to be spluttering with indignation, and they just make me laugh. Come on, we have the best malts. Malts for everybody. The headline of this story is, Biden would revamp fraying intel community. Intelligence has become a political weapon under Trump, the Democratic nominee's advisors say. Intelligence has become a political weapon under Trump. Urge to kill rising. You see, the intelligence community tried to take out Trump during the 2016 election, and then they tried a coup against him, which lasted for 3 years. It's pretty much still ongoing. But no, intelligence has become a political weapon under Trump. These clowns, what have they ever gotten right? What have they ever gotten right? I was talking about the FBI, and I mentioned, if you missed it, that in decades of movies and television shows, the FBI are the guys who show up and they're arrogant and they mess everything up. But apparently everyone in America loves the FBI. Did everyone in America love the CIA? Because do they think that the CIA is like Jason Bourne or something? The CIA has been grossly incompetent. And a few years ago, I reviewed a book on the book club by, what was it called? Tim Weiner, A Legacy of Ashes. It's just a damning indictment. But no, happy days are here again for the CIA and the alphabet community if Joe Biden wins. What was it? David Frum was tweeting the other day that the willing worker. Yeah, we're going to revive the willing worker concept, that anyone who's a willing worker who wants to come to America is going to be let into America, because that would be so great for the people who already live in America. And what if they turned out not to be willing workers? Are they going to be deported even after they've gotten their citizenship? That could be a little tricky. What if they're the willing workers who are paid so little by their employers, such as Walmart and McDonald's, that their employers give them all these pamphlets saying, hey, yeah, we know we don't pay you anything, but Uncle Sucker will, and here's how you get that money. Oh, the other part was American troops are going to remain in Afghanistan. Wow, that's a real crowd pleaser, isn't it? So Max Fisher, who was apparently he writes the interpreter for the New York Times, sounds deep, which is a column exploring the ideas and context behind major world events. So he has a very sad tweet on October the 14th. Every serious reporter I know has sacrificed much of their personal lives and mental health to do their job these last 4 years. It's an easy retweet generator to claim journalists see all this as a big fun party, but that is not what is happening. Won't somebody please worry about the journalists? I mentioned reporter's disease. I used to be a reporter, and I know about it, and it was something that I had to fight. Dear reporters, your obsessions are not normal obsessions. Most of the things that you think are terribly important, few people care about. And, oh, yes, I wrote this story. And you know that, like in a week or so, your story is going to be forgotten. Maybe the story is going to be forgotten in a day or so. Maybe the story is DOA. But of course, reporters tend to think, columnists are the same way, that everything they write is deeply, deeply significant and is going to be pondered decades or perhaps centuries in the future. And Oberyn, who I mentioned earlier in the show, because he and Shiva Paul, my two favorite of all time journalists, Oberyn wrote that journalism, which is written to be immortal or long-lasting, as it were, is terrible journalism. The whole point of good journalism is its immediacy. So yes, people were not very kind to Max Fisher in the comments. He was ratioed, as the young people like to say. Now, Jacob Walensky, okay, he commented, "Thank you for your service. Pale primate, nonstop lying will do that to people. Hatcher, I'd be haunted by guilt too." Sear versus Bro said, "I agree. They have sacrificed their mental health and gone completely insane. Perhaps they should take a break until they can recover." Yes. Pity, pity, pity. Poor, poor journalists. Okay, what's going on in the chat here? Laramie Hirsch says, Pennsylvania, such bullshit, but it is to be expected. Yeah. British American says, worried that if Trump wins, when he wins, they will kick out the supports from under the US dollar, bring down the world economy, and pin it on Trump. We saw that a great deal of success of the Trump economy, if we can call it that, before the COVID-19 panic wrecked everything, was that Trump was essentially creating an autarky or something close to autarky in the United States. Because the United States market is so big and so rich that the globalists claim that, oh, no, you need China and India, et cetera, as an integral part of everything. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't need any of those countries. I suppose America's decided that it wants cheap tat, which is sold at Walmart. But you can get the Vietnamese and other people to make that cheap tat just as well. My Trail of Disgrace says, had my Twitter account instantly locked for posting one of Hunter crack binge photos in reply to an obnoxious From tweet. Forced to delete, so posted a generic crack pipe instead. John S. says, the suffering of trickle-down media whores makes me smile. And I recognize the reference, John S. Daniel Robertson says, when will KMG review a Graham Greene novel? Amron says, I vote for the end of The Affair. That's a good suggestion. It is. Jonathan Ferguson says, with $27 million debt, it's a miracle the US dollar hasn't collapsed already, but who's worse off? Who's worse off? That's the problem. This is mutually assured destruction here. Again, the money's not going to be paid back. Put that idea out of your head. It is not going to be put back. It's not going to be paid back. YT says, I moved to Arizona yesterday. It's so beautiful here, and all my Uber drivers so far are very vocal and enthusiastic Trump supporters. It's so refreshing after New York City. William Hicks says, Kevin, I recently watched Romero's, that would be George Romero's 1973 Crazies, also known as codename Trixie. Was wondering if are you familiar with it. No, I'm not. I saw a Romero film, a vampire film he made. What was it called? Martin? Is that what it's called? That I've never seen The Human Centipede, but this film by Romero, quite possibly the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. But then, of course, I'm thinking of the David Lynch film based on his TV show. That was reprehensible. Oh, $10 billion for a loaf of bread, says Tom Anderson. Well, inflation is one of the ways. Of course, we've had tremendous inflation ever since capitalism 2.0. The consumer product index is a hoax. It's just an absolute hoax. Oh, prices have only gone up 1.3% this year. Oh, but that doesn't include real estate or the cost of college and university tuition. Oh, and it doesn't include health care. How very convenient. Okay, let's see if there's anything else noteworthy here. We can never leave Afghanistan, says Donald Robertson. Come on, stop trolling. Contracu says the partisans of woke will not tolerate any mockery of their pseudo-religion, no matter how slight. In a few years, beheadings will probably be on the table. In CHOP, talked of guillotines. The secret is to do what Canada did. The secret is to shame everyone such that they are afraid of saying things. And you can run into professional trouble. You get harassed by human rights committees. But more to the point, you will never, ever get a well-paying job unless you kowtow to the orthodoxy. That's simple. And it's worked really well in Canada. Oh, Laramie Hirsch, just to explain, RBG Prevails. She held on so long such that Amy Comey Barrett was not on the court in order to vote against creep and backslider John Roberts and stop this madness in Pennsylvania. Edward Norton could star in the Biden movie. Steve Saylor has made an interesting and I think profound point about Joe Biden, is that next to Donald Trump, Joe Biden is the Trumpiest politician in the United States. The kind of stuff well before Donald Trump got on the scene, Joe Biden was snapping, flaming out at reporters in a way that you think, no one does this. This is entirely disproportionate, entirely so. Okay, the corn pop. The corn pop. Look, one last thing about Jim Carrey. That there was this character that he played in Living Color. He was a severely burned and deranged fireman. And you can see that rather informs his impersonation of old slow Joe. Okay, I want to talk about the United Kingdom here. I want to talk about the United Kingdom itself because Wales has been put into lockdown. Toby Young reports at Lockdown Skeptics. The First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, announced yesterday that Wales would be plunged into a full lockdown from this Friday until October the 9th. People will be told to stay at home while pubs, restaurants, hotels, and non-essential shops will shut. Primary schools will reopen after the half-term break, but only years 7 and 8 in secondary schools will return at that time under new fire break rules. Gathering indoors and outdoors with people not in your household will also be banned. First Minister Mark Drakeford said the time-limited fire break will be a short, sharp shock to turn back the clock, slow down the virus, and buy us more time. This fellow does not know how viruses work. Yes, we're just going to keep punishing people. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Needless to say, Toby Young points out, daily deaths in Wales are in low single digits and falling. Daily deaths from COVID peaked at 11 on October 7th and haven't climbed above single digits since. The cumulative death toll in Wales as of yesterday was 1,712, which is about 3.9% of the total in England. There is absolutely no need for a circuit breaker. Let's call this by its proper name, a hospitality industry breaker. One of the many irritating things about this is that Mark Drakeford can indulge in this pointless virtue signaling without worrying about the economic impact, because the Chancellor of the Exchequer has agreed to bung Wales an extra £350 million this year. We're now facing an untenable situation where Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland can all afford to introduce these absurd, economically destructive measures because the English are covering their losses. It is this, more than anything else, that will tear the union apart. Matthew Lynn has the right idea. He's written a comment piece for The Telegraph saying that Scotland and Wales should pay for their own lockdowns. Yeah, but that would be impossible because they depend on England for everything. He writes, the shops will be closed in Cardiff and Swansea from Friday evening. The pubs have already been shut in Belfast and Londonderry, at least to indoor customers. Kind of controversial there that the Telegraph uses the form Londonderry rather than Derry. I approve. The bars are closed across central Scotland and the schools may not be far behind. As the number of COVID-19 infections has started to surge again, the devolved nations of the UK have been a lot quicker than England to reach for the sledgehammer of total lockdown. True, that is up to them. Powers have been handed down to Belfast, Cardiff, and Edinburgh, and they are entitled to use them as they see fit. But there surely should be one condition, that they pay for the consequences. Lockdown might or might not be an effective way of fighting COVID-19. We can argue about that. However, one point is surely clear. It is shockingly expensive. The UK suffered a 20% hit to the economy in the second quarter, the toughest period of lockdown. Even if it does encourage independence, a prolonged closure of the economy will mean higher taxes and more debt for years to come, and the bill for that should be shouldered by the people who have chosen the path. I wrote a piece about a decade ago on this question. They called it the West Lothian question. I'm going to read some of it to you. I have strong feelings about this. Will the Scots ever be happy is the arresting title of a documentary first aired by the BBC in June. You can find it on YouTube. One might think this question is purely rhetorical or even slightly mocking, given that the Scots, 8.5% of the population, might be said to run the United Kingdom, but apparently not. Now keep in mind this was written a decade ago. Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister, is a Scot, as is Alistair Darling, as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Brown was Chancellor of the Exchequer in the previous administration when Darling was his deputy and Tony Blair, another Scot, was PM. Under Blair, Scots were Home Secretary, Defence Secretary, Lords Chancellor, and Speaker of the House of Commons. Presiding behind the scenes was Blair's chief flack and enforcer, Alistair Campbell. The Scots have been so dominant in Britain since 1997 that many speak resentfully and fearfully of a Caledonian mafia. And yet the Scots are still unhappy, despite Blair's attempts to placate them, i.e. buy off their votes, by giving them their own government 10 years ago. Indeed, devolution has served mainly to promote the fortunes of the Scottish National Policy, whose leader, Alex Salmond, now presides over the Scottish Parliament in its hideous building at Holyrood. Salmond believes that the Scottish independence is inevitable and will unveil his plan for a referendum on St. Andrew's Day. Brian Taylor, the reporter who hosted the documentary, declared that Scottish people want more. We want the freedom to be different culturally and politically, and we always have. Taylor, who admitted he doesn't own a kilt, dressed up in one for the cameras nonetheless, and we were also treated to a haggis stall and impromptu Highland dancing from a comely lassie. To the resentful English, however, Scottish culture is best expressed these days by binge drinking, knife fights, and deep-fried Mars bars. I'm not kidding. Look it up. in Scottish politics is nothing more than a continuous and escalating series of demands for more autonomy and more money from south of the border. It was the then Scottish MP for West Lothian, Tam Dalyell, who in 1977 first identified the gross iniquity of devolution. For how long will English constituencies and English honourable members tolerate at least 119 honourable members from Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland exercising an important and probably often decisive effect on English politics, while they themselves have no say in the same matters in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland? 30 years later, Alex Salmond became the walking personification of the West Lothian question, being the effective Prime Minister of Scotland at the same time he sits as a separatist MP in the House of Commons. Since Salmond came to power in Edinburgh, he has frozen council taxes and scrapped tolls on bridges. Scottish university students now enjoy free tuition, and the Scottish elderly enjoy free care. Scottish school meals are now subsidized by a whole pound, while English school children must get by with only 43 pence. Yet Salmond continues to accuse London of withholding money due to Scotland. When Gordon Brown's Labour Party is crushed in next year's election, his successor will be David Cameron, another member of the Scottish diaspora. Taylor put this question to Cameron: how can he legitimately govern Scotland when his Conservative Party has no support to speak of there? Cameron intimated that he would reward the land of his fathers with still more autonomy and money. Salmond is having none of it. If the argument is to treat Scotland with respect, then it must be translated into more than rhetoric. It must be translated into deeds. In other words, more is never enough. Why do the English put up with this? As a Scottish academic explained to Taylor, national identity still doesn't matter south of the border. It would be more accurate to say that the English are not allowed to have a national identity. And it is at this point that we can recognize the almost exact parallels between British and Canadian politics. Quebec has dominated Canada for over 50 years. Quebec is a nation. English Canada is not. Quebec has its own culture, which must be protected. English Canada does not. Quebec runs the civil service and the armed forces, sends separatist MPs to Ottawa to craft legislation for all Canadians, and Quebec is the biggest beneficiary of Canada's equalization system, which is our very own version of the West Lothian question. As one who stands for universal patriotism, I can only applaud Alex Salmond, just as I cheer on the efforts of Gilles Duceppe. Scotland for the Scottish, Quebec for the Quebecois. But if the Modi Anglais in both Canada and Britain continue to fund the power without responsibility regimes in Quebec and Scotland, why shouldn't the Quebecois and Scottish continue to choose to enjoy the best of both worlds? As Rudyard Kipling put it in a slightly different context, once you have paid him the Dane geld, you will never get rid of the Dane. Kipling's solution: it is wrong to put temptation in the path of any nation for fear they should succumb and go astray. So when you are requested to pay up or be molested, you will find it better policy to say, we never pay anyone Dane geld, no matter how trifling the cost. For the end of that game is oppression and shame, and the nation that plays it is lost. Or as Peter Brimlow once put it, if Quebec can't be persuaded to secede from Canada, it should be expelled, just as Scotland should be expelled from Great Britain, just as the Czechs expelled the Slovaks from Czechoslovakia. No, it just simply doesn't make any sense that let's look at Northern Ireland to give an example. Last time I checked, about 75% of the revenue of the Northern Ireland administration comes from London. 75%. So this is a fake country or pseudo country, entirely fake. Northern Ireland should become independent, or it should take its chances with the South. So let's get back to COVID-19. Yes, everywhere the story has been the same now for months, that cases are rising, but deaths are falling, and deaths have fallen to nugatory levels. And even some places cases are not. Why does Hancock, that's Matt Hancock, want to lock up the north of England when cases are falling? Zero transmission in pubs, gyms, and restaurants, according to the National Health Service app. A reader complains about The Guardian. As a reader of The Guardian since my early 20s, 40 years ago, I was willing to believe in the integrity of its journalism. My faith has waned over the years as the paper's investigative journalism has become more obviously and frequently shallow, and in the last weeks has become a government mouthpiece. But I didn't expect such flagrant falsehoods as the ones I have read today in its coverage of Scott Atlas's Twitter ban. In particular, quote, in a stream of posts, Atlas falsely claimed that several U.S. states and other countries had taken up widespread use of masks without evidence of any positive effect. He also incorrectly said that there were many harms to the practice, unquote. To the contrary, there's considerable research to support Atlas available to anyone with internet access. The article continued, Atlas's views on how to deal with the virus have raised alarm in scientific circles. He has repeatedly cast doubt on masks and social distancing and suggested people could gain natural self-defenses against the disease, even without a vaccine through herd immunity, unquote. And the reader comments, which scientific circles? All of them, and what exactly is alarming? It goes on, Friday saw the daily number of confirmed cases exceed 70,000 for the first time since July, with almost 900 deaths. In a leaked report, the White House put 26 states in the red zone, indicating a dangerous level of new infections, including almost all states in the Midwest, unquote. In fact, the rates are falling, even according to the authority the article itself cites. That site says there were 393 deaths on Sunday, which supports Trump's assertion rather more than The Guardian's. If the number is on your side, cite the numbers. If the numbers aren't on your side, simply make up the numbers. Oh, and what numbers? Oh, cases are increasing, cases increase. What do you mean by a case? Do you mean someone who is ill? No, simply someone who has contracted the virus. Well, if these people are not seriously ill, and if they are not hospitalized, how is this a problem? Okay, let's talk about William Briggs's latest essay. He is, of course, is the statistician to the stars. One of the things we learned in 2020 is apparently no one understands anything, or very few people understand anything about statistics. Oh, I'm going to be talking about Harry and Meghan Mertz in just a minute. He has a book. He has a new book called The Price of Panic, and YouTube is already whacking our interviews about the book. Whack one clean out of here. Ha ha ha. Get the book. Our tech lords don't want you to read before it is too late. The gist of his essay is it's all politics now. Trump called the fabulous Fauci an idiot and said he seems to get more airtime than anybody since the late, great Bob Hope, which is funny if you're old. As for example, Wales is locking down again, but not until Friday. They had 3 attributed corona doom deaths, hundreds of other kinds of deaths as we do. Oh, Ireland is going into a level 5 lockdown for 6 weeks. I don't know what that means, but level 5, that sounds pretty serious. Here's the true state of the corona doom crisis in Ireland. Deaths as of October the 17th, 18th? Zero. Yes, that's a 0. This is now all about political control and nothing else. Flaming idiocy is a possible explanation too, but consider our rulers consistently tell us how smart they are. They can't be wrong about this. Here's a tweet from Devi Sridhar, chair of global public health at the University of Edinburgh. Quote, it is the virus killing the economy, not the restrictions themselves. Okay. This is hilariously false as any major media headline. The virus is killing those sick 75 plus folks, most of whom no longer work. The lockdown stopped people from earning their daily bread. Now this person must know this and so is willing to either lie to herself or to us. Yeah, I know my listeners and viewers can't get enough of the Mertzes, Harry and Meghan. And Time Magazine apparently is very excited by participation in one of their talks. I guess it's not a TED Talk because No one has really taken Time magazine seriously. It's really had no status in the publishing industry for a long, long time. But in any event, on October 20th, which is today, Engineering a Better World will bring together experts, advocates, online creators, and journalists to discuss the pursuit of a more compassionate, safe, and trustworthy digital world. On October the 20th, Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, will host a specially curated edition of Time 100 Talks, Time series of virtual conversations that convenes extraordinary leaders from every field to spotlight solutions and encourage action. In what sense are Harry and Meghan leaders? They used to be part of the royal family, which was a leadership position, but they decided that was too boring or whatever, so they kicked it in the head. Presented in partnership with Procter and Gamble, and you know they can be trusted. Boy, they sure delivered a telling blow to toxic masculinity last year with their Gillette brand. They took an $8 billion hit for this campaign, which I guess proves their sincerity, if nothing else. Yes, themed around the topic of engineering a better world, the special episode of Time 100 Talks reflects a foundational element in the Duke and Duchess's nonprofit Archewell, I have no idea how it's pronounced, building online communities that are more compassionate, safe, and trustworthy. And then there's a list of participants and the hosts of Teenager Therapy. I had not heard before of Teenager Therapy, but the Harry Markle site, which I highly recommend, it told me about this therapy group, and it was quite disconcerting. Quite disconcerting because apparently they love Lucifer. Let's see. Another tactic is to use others to spread your message, Harry Markle writes, and that is the trap the Teenagers Therapy podcast group have fallen into. They are impressionable teenagers that seem to have some issues and wanted a place to air and discuss them, and one must remember that they are minors. Some seem to come from broken homes and are from far less affluent backgrounds, and so they are prey. Most of them seek anyone who will praise them and to tell them what they want to hear. That's what predatory groomers do, so that is what the Sussexes have done. Over the past week, the teens have taken to promoting themselves with their 5 minutes of fame from the podcast they aired with the Sussexes, milking it daily. Yet it appears that some interactions on social media have been hostile, to say the least. Attacked critical comments, deleted most of them, banned users who disagreed with them, posted the now infamous Lucifer tweet. I'm unsure who deleted it, the creator or Twitter, where they seemed to summon the devil to attack someone who made a comment they didn't like. They then had the audacity to suggest that all those who had opinions and who didn't praise them needed therapy. That is arrogance at its finest, but should we give them a pass because they are 17 years old? We all do and say silly off-the-cuff things at that age, and we look back and cringe, but they have done this oh so publicly that it can damage their future college and job prospects. Here's a tweet. Can some brand give us money so we can help people pay for their therapy, please? It seems that several of the offensive tweets have been removed, but what it highlights is that they're immature, vulnerable to being influenced, inexperienced, and lack certain social skills on how to interact with adults in real-life situations. My hope is that some adults that they know and trust can tell them that this is notoriety and not fame, and they fail to remember that some future employers will know how they have behaved. While they may have some teens and Sussex cult fans singing their praises, they don't matter when it comes to real life. When you have a college interview or an employer finds out that you have publicly summoned the devil to attack someone online. Perhaps that's something they should stop and think about. Do I actually have to state that making a public post wishing the devil attack someone is wrong? And whoever posted that has some serious issues that require professional help? And I'm looking at this tweet with a portrait of Baphomet, I think, and two lesser demons to the sides. And it is a plea to Lucifer. Take thine enemy, take him, her, smite, break him, her, scorn him, her in the night. Yikes. And these are the people that the Mertzes are associating themselves with. Yes. Is that, I'm a teenager and I'm angry about everything, and shouldn't you be suggesting products for teenagers to buy, as Meghan, of course, herself did for many years with her Instagram site, The Tig, where she would publish photographs of herself, and there'd be a list with Twitter addresses of all of the companies, such as Prada and whatever, whose products she was wearing. And as Harry Markle points out now, she is very hypocritically talking about internet addiction and people living their lives on the internet. Let's see. Alex Berenson says they are sick of school closings, sick of signs telling them to wear masks, sick of being told Thanksgiving is a health hazard. They aren't at home on Zoom calls. They're going to Walmart for groceries, and they are done with the row. And so is real Donald Trump. We will see. Yeah, I mean, this very binary division between Biden and Trump, because Biden wants everyone cowering indoors forever, and Trump wants America to get back to life and get back to business. The question isn't whether the virus was created from the ground up. Almost no one believes that. It isn't much of a weapon anyway. It rarely kills anyone healthy. The question is whether it is a natural virus that escaped from a lab, possibly during gain of function research. That is a particularly sinister phrase, gain of function research. How can we take something, how can we take a poison and make it deadlier? Gain of function research is what they call it. So let's go back to the chat here. It seems to be particularly lively today. Bolticarian horticulture specialist, PhD, pics of Hunter Biden with underage girls coming out. Yikes. No, I have not seen them yet. I guess a year ago, I could have gone to Drudge and I would have been directed to them, but Drudge is playing for the other team now. That's assuming. It's assuming he still has anything to do with his site. Gateway Pundit. Okay. All right. Oh, Jonathan Ferguson says, what is Mertz a reference to? It's an in-joke, which I have tried to make a wider joke. I really don't like this woman. I don't like anything about her. And of course, previously, I never liked her ginger waster husband. And her name, of course, isn't Mertz. It's something else, but I have forgotten what it is because I've been calling her Mertz. It's a very old joke. It's from the show I Love Lucy from the 1950s, where Lucy's next door neighbors were the Mertzes. So that's where I got it from. Jonathan Perkins says, it's a shame Quebec didn't bugger off in 1995 and that so many foolish Canadians were determined that they stay. It was one of the saddest nights of my life. I was in a Boston Pizza, and we were so close. We were winning for most of the night. So close. Goose says $28 billion for the people who grow your food, $500 billion for the people who commit 56% of the violent crime. Well, the rapper endorsements are coming in thick and fast, right? So it's got to be worth something. So Gateway Pundit, okay. After I get off the air, I will look into that. But isn't there a problem here? Isn't publishing of this material a crime? If you were Scots, wouldn't you take the English for whatever you could? Says Donald Robertson. It's a Scottish name, isn't it? Yeah, I understand that. What I don't understand is how the English put up with it. They can't even wave their own national flag. Oh, the St. George's flag. Oh, that's a Nazi flag. Just piss off. Just piss off. This has been going on for so long. What time zone is KMG in? I'm in the Pacific time zone. Okay, what's your opinion on Canadian internment camps? There's been suggestions that there are going to be internment camps in both Ontario and Quebec. I have a very low opinion of that, of course. Tom Anderson says, have you ever seen the David Cronenberg film, The Brood? I have seen it, and all of his early films are good. Cronenberg has this, in his early films, he has this body horror, which transfers over to a horror with sexual intercourse. And then, I don't know, something happened to him or whatever. Maybe his experiences with women in his early life were unpleasant. And there's sort of a break. What was it? Maybe after Dead Ringers? Sort of a break there where suddenly sex is great, sex is wonderful. So that is to say, I prefer his earlier films over his later films. Oh, I mean, look at The Fly, his remake of The Fly. When Gina Davis gives birth, oh man, that's enough to put anyone off sexual intercourse forever. Okay, I think we're done talking about COVID now. Okay, Google monopoly antitrust case filed by the Department of Justice and by several American states. Let's go to, I don't know, we all know that story, right? The story in the Epoch Times is more interesting than that. White House Chief of Staff warns of a potential lawsuit against tech giants. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows on Monday suggested the Trump administration bring a lawsuit against the social media companies that have recently restricted and blocked news reports about Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden and his son Hunter. In an interview on Fox and Friends, Meadows said that the online platforms try to censor conservatives and suggested that if the story about Joe and Hunter Biden was about President Donald Trump and his family, tech companies would not have blocked the story. They have two standards, one for one campaign, one for the other, but I do believe that additional lawsuits will be filed perhaps as early as today to go after that. Listen, it's not just the campaigns, he said. They're now starting to censor actually reporters. That's a dangerous place for them to go when the arbiter of what they are the arbiter of what they deem to be the truth. Yes, the double standard. I have railed for years against the use of the double standard argument because it's weak. It's just entirely weak. Oh, we always lose. And here's another example of how we lose. What you want to do is you want to get even with these people and let them know that they are not going to be able to get away with this double standard. They need to be hurt. And I mean that, of course, in a metaphorical sense. Okay. CNBC's Jim Cramer said on Tuesday that he believes the government's antitrust lawsuit against Alphabet's Google is a loser case. I've been saying over and over again, they ought to break this company up and bring out value, the Mad Money host said. It's the DOJ taking it from buy to strong buy. Well, you see, Jim Cramer, some of us look at the world in terms other than simply money. It's the question of free speech here. And there's also a question of restriction of trade going on as well. I wanted to talk about, oh yes, the Senate Republicans decided not to subpoena the CEOs of Twitter and Facebook because of course they did. They don't want to be seen as meanies. They don't want to jeopardize future jobs on K Street. Ron Unz has a piece on the Anti-Defamation League, which is, like all Ron Unz pieces, quite long. So I will talk about it perhaps on a different day. James O'Keefe tweeted yesterday, breaking: Google program manager confirms election interference in favor of Joe Biden. Search, quote, skewed by owners and drivers of the algorithms, unquote. Plain and simple, trying to play God. If Trump wins, there will be riots. If the left wins, they will be ecstatic. So here's a story about my country, and I don't know that I really like to talk about Canada all that much on this show because it is relentlessly depressing, and I don't really want to do that. But every so often I talk about these things just to give you an idea of what goes on in my country and how you want to do whatever is necessary for your country not to resemble my country. There's a story in the Globe and Mail, which is Canada's leading newspaper. It's a national newspaper. I suppose it would be, I don't know, like the equivalent perhaps of the London Times, or perhaps a little bit more than the Financial Times, I suppose. But it's a puff piece. It's a puff piece. And it's written about a man who you haven't heard of, but I guess we're all going to hear about him good and hard. New head of Canadian Race Relations Foundation says group will take stronger advocacy role, and it's written by a woman called Marika Walsh. In its 2018 annual report, the Canadian Race Relations Foundation wrote, "It is not the foundation's role to be a strong advocate. For an organization born out of an apology for systemic racism, that starting point made little sense to Mohammed Hashim. It is not an organization born out of an apology for systemic racism. It is an organization that was born out of a settlement between the government of Canada and Japanese Canadians." And typical of Brian Mulroney, who was prime minister at the time, simply rather than giving the Japanese money in exchange for their property being stolen from them, oh no, we have to have the Canadian Race Relations Foundation instead. Wanting to change it, he applied to lead the Crown Corporation. It's Crown Corporation. It's also described as a charity as well. And again, this is why NGOs must be wiped out. You Crown Corporation? Are you a government operation? You a non-government operation? Because you seem to get an awful lot of money from government. To his surprise, the hiring committee handed him the keys rather than showing him the door. Big surprise, big surprise. I told them it was wrong for them to put that in the annual report. I was shocked to hear that. And I think we need to figure out a new approach, one that has advocacy as a central core. Mr. Hashim said in an interview last week during his first few days on the job. In intervening years, since the foundation was launched in 1997, some activists and experts in the field say the organization has not gone as far as it could in holding the government to account and advocating for the most vulnerable in Canadian society. Who are the most vulnerable in Canadian society? Well, the assumption here, the planet axiom, is that anyone who's a complaint to make about race. At times, Jack Jedwab, a former foundation board member and president of the Association for Canadian Studies, said it looked as though they're getting direction from government rather than giving direction to government. Well, it works both ways. It's symbiosis, which properly speaking means the mutual parasitism of two dissimilar organisms, because they both have the same goals. It's an astroturf organization, actually. There's so many of these crown corporations, NGOs as they're called, that the government wants to make certain changes, typically revolutionary changes. And so, we need independent confirmation that there's a crisis and that certain measures are required. Well, look, here are some experts who are telling us exactly what we want to hear. In response to that criticism, Hashim said the foundation will be outspoken in addressing racism, pushing Ottawa to move from studying the issues to actually fixing them. I think there's a lot of room for the government to move on the criminal justice system, on reforming the police, and I hope that the foundation can play a role in bringing people together. The Black Lives Matter movement has helped to show the absolute necessity of public policymakers to finally respond, and respond decisively. But by what? Defunding the police? Abolishing the police? ACAB? Etc.? His risky interview pitch wasn't the only thing that made an unusual appointment by a Liberal government to a nonpartisan position. His anti-racism work Started as a response to Stephen Harper's government, he said, and until taking this job, Hashim was a member of the NDP, worked on Jagmeet Singh's leadership campaign, and organized for the provincial party. Oh, I see. So we're supposed to believe that Marika Walsh doesn't know that the Liberal Party of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has entered into a coalition with the New Democratic Party led by Jagmeet Singh. We're just supposed to pretend that that didn't happen, because that might suggest that a prominent NDP activist getting this leading role might be seen as kind of, how would you say, quid pro quo. He's now shedding his partisan stripes. Yeah, sure he is. He told the Globe and Mail he was particularly concerned about the Conservatives' 2015 election campaign, which he called horrible and terrible. Hashim said the Conservative push for a snitch line on barbaric cultural practices contributed to a spike in violence against Muslim women. Prove it. Since that election, Hashim said the Conservatives have become more inclusive and are going in the right direction on race relations. Among the issues seizing his attention today is the rise in anti-Asian sentiment, which he said is fueled by rhetoric from the small c conservative movement. You can replace China with Islam, and it feels like 2003, he said, referring to the backlash of Islamophobia that rose out of the 9/11 terror attacks. I was talking about meta at the top of the show. That is the important thing about September the 11th. Not the terrorist acts, but the Islamophobia, which came about as a result. Hashim said that China is deserving of criticism for its human rights record, but he said it needs to be talked about in a way that's, quote, not alienating, unquote. Piss off. The story does not say where Hashim was born, but I just come to my absolute limit with foreigners accusing us Canadians of being bad people. Why did you come here? Or why did your parents come here? Why are people from China, India, Pakistan, etc., flocking to come to my country? Surely not because it's such a horrible place. His role, he says, is to help people navigate uncomfortable conversations. No, these are not conversations, these are lectures, which he calls necessary to changing the status quo. It's a skill his former boss at the Toronto-based Labour Community Services, Fatouma Mohammed, says this allows him to bring a urgency and greater awareness of systemic racism to decision and policy making. Canadian Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault, who signed off on Hashim's appointment, said the posting shows the minority Liberals are ready and willing to act. I want to push as hard as we possibly can so that 50 years down the line, we don't have to apologize again. Yeah, what you mean by we, Kimo Sabe? This piece in the Globe and Mail, this puff piece, makes this sort of a glancing reference to the fact that for quite a few years, Hashim ran a, how would you say, a PR campaign for Canada's Muslims. The own paper, the Globe and Mail, wrote on this in February of this year. Hi, my name is Mohammed. I'm here to help you. Meet the unofficial crisis manager for Muslim Canadians. When racism and terrorism put Muslim communities under a harsh spotlight, Mohammed Hashim is often the one comforting them, liaising with police and media, and helping cooler heads to prevail. It's a job he hopes one day will be obsolete, but then he'd be out of a job, wouldn't he? Because I can't regard him as anything other than a rent seeker, pure and simple. And there's a picture of him glowering at the camera. He coached prominent Muslims on what to say when journalists called, well, this is clearly a deviation from our faith, was a favorite line in situations like this. Hashim loved the word deviant. It clearly and strongly communicated that this person was not following the teachings of Islam. This is in reference to a terrorist incident in Toronto, Danforth Avenue, in July 2018, where a man called Faisal Hussein killed 2 people and wounded 13 using a Smith & Wesson 40 caliber. He committed suicide after a shootout with the Toronto Police Service. And Faisal Hussein, this fellow Hashim, was brought into it to say, oh, the family is crushed and, oh, nothing to do with Islam. No. And of course, incidents such as this should have nothing to do with policy. They shouldn't inform in policy at all, except we got a very different response to the Toronto van attack, again in 2018, when a man of mixed ethnicity, Alec Manassian, he killed 10 people and hurt another 16 when he decided to drive on the sidewalk along Yonge Street and run over people. But it turns out this man was an incel. And immediately, everyone was talking about incels, and incels must be dealt with. Seriously, the media took the line that incels are one of the top terrorist threats. And they really took that line. But let's get to the core of this here. I'm at the website of the Canadian Race Relations Foundation. What is the vision? Well, its vision is creating a Canada in which individual, institutional, and systemic racism are eliminated. This is not only impossible, it is a totalitarian vision. How are you going to eliminate individual racism? A lot of people hold what have been described as racist views, but they keep them to themselves. So presumably this means that all Canadians are going to have to be interrogated and perhaps coerced into confessing their real feelings about racial manners. And I'm looking at the board of directors, and it's just a diversity fest. Except it's really not a diversity fest because there's 10, 14 people there. And how many of them are white? 1, 2, 3, maybe 3. Can't tell about this third woman. But it's nice work if you can get it, coming from foreign countries and coming to my country and telling us how horrible we are. And not only that, how horrible we have always been. As the old joke goes, you can just go home. But I guess that might involve some sacrifices. We have some Cronenberg news here. My Trail of Disgrace says his experience with his first wife was negative and he had to rescue his daughter from her. His second marriage has been much happier, still married. Goose says, I know an old church lady who would probably like KMG. I might just send her this way. Okay. Some aspects of this experience are reflected in The Brood, says My Trail of Disgrace. Yeah, I figured that was the case. I figured that was the case. Yo Mama says, anyone else get the feeling that we are wearing the nightmare vision goggles? Bulgarian horticultural specialist PhD says Rudy turned the photos over to the Delaware State Police. Okay, so it was confirmed that Joe Biden's sainted late son, Beau, of course that wasn't his real name, just as Hunter Biden, his Christian name is actually Robert, which is a fine name, that a member of the DuPont family had raped his 3-year-old daughter and he'd confessed to it. And Beau Biden, who was Attorney General of Delaware, allowed this man to be under house arrest instead of go to prison. And while under house arrest, he molested his son. And one would think that this would be sufficient to destroy Beau Biden's reputation forever, but I guess not. My Trail of Disgrace, is it a reference to Lucy's neighbor from I Love Lucy? Yes. Yes, indeed it is. So that is the show for tonight. I shall be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. On Theater Thursday this week, I will be discussing a beautiful film made by a crazy man, Werner Herzog, in 1979, Nosferatu, the Vampire. And more in the Halloween spirit, October 29th, Robert Wise's 1963 masterpiece of psychological terror, The Haunting. And on the book club this week, a memoir of the Spanish Civil War by Peter Kemp, Mine Were of Trouble. And October 30th, the day before Halloween, a suitably macabre novel, The Loved One by Evelyn Waugh, which is a lightly disguised book about Forest Lawn in Los Angeles. If you'd like to support this live stream with a donation, very much appreciated, especially now. My PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send me money via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca, and I will leave you with my traditional benediction. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that you, my dear listeners and viewers, form a genuine human connection of some kind in order to ease the burden. Good night.